Hello friends, I am Sharad Raze, practicing chartered accountant for the last more than 38 years and also handling disciplinary cases for about 17-18 years. We have concluded both the schedules to the respective statutes, that is Chartered Accountants Act, Cost and Works Accountants Act, as well as the Company Secretaries Act, which are identical in all respects. Now today I am starting with 2 or 3 lectures pertaining to General Council General Guidelines 2008 issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So naturally it is applicable only to chartered accountants and not to other professionals, that is cost accountants and company secretaries. The Council General Guidelines 2008 has been issued under Clause 1 of Part 2 of Schedule 2 to the Chartered Accountants Act. Simply it means it has a statutory force issued under a specific clause of the Chartered Accountants Act. Now, as per para number 1.2 of the guidelines, these guidelines are applicable to both practicing as well as chartered accountants in service, to both the categories of professionals. Now let us see in next 2-3 lectures maximum the provisions of the General Council guidelines which are mandatorily applicable to all the chartered accountants. Now clause 5 or para 5 requires that every chartered accountant shall keep and maintain proper books of accounts including cash book and ledger. What is proper books of account is not listed out. It simply says proper books of accounts. Obviously the chartered accountants need not be told about what is proper, and including cash book and ledger, it is an including, that is not exhaustive list. That means other necessary books of accounts, registers will have to be maintained by every chartered accountant, whether in practice or in service, pertaining to his professional activity only. Then next is para 6 pertaining to restrictions in respect of tax audits. As all of us are aware that a practicing chartered accountant can conduct maximum 60 tax audits for every financial year. The 60 number is with respect to financial year, and in counting this number it is per partner. Suppose it is a proprietary concern, then a proprietor can sign maximum 60 tax audit reports. If it is a partnership firm of A, B and C, then A, B and C taken together can sign maximum 180 tax audit reports. However, if A has accepted tax audits in his individual capacity in spite of a partner of a partnership firm, suppose he has accepted the audit of 10 such entities, then for the partnership firm of ABC, the total tax audit entitlement will be 180 minus 10 audits acceptable by a partner in his individual capacity. So B has also accepted, C has also accepted in his individual capacity, then to that extent the number of 60 per partner will get reduced. Not only that, suppose C is also a partner in another partnership firm, then for the purpose of C's entitlement, maximum number of audits shall be C, taken into account both the audit firms. Suppose he is a partner in ABC as well as he is a partner in PQR. Then for ABC as a partner and PQR as a partner, C can have maximum tax audit assignments of 60 taken together and not 60 per partner per firm. However, in computing this number 60, the tax audit requirements to comply with the provisions of presumptive taxation like 44AD, 44ADA and 44AE shall be excluded. Besides, the guidelines also state that a chartered accountant in practice is doing the audit of head office and branches, then taken together it will be considered as one assignment only. That means a chartered accountant is doing the audit of a cooperative bank with 10 branches, then it will not be considered as 11 audits, but it will be considered only as one audit. Or if you have been appointed as tax auditor for 2 or 3 branches, and you do not have HO audit, then all the 2 or 3 branches, even if you are issuing audit reports separately, it will be considered as one assignment, it will be treated as one tax audit. Now, for instance, in case of nationalized banks, we do the audits, statutory audit of bank branches as well as tax audit of bank branches. In that case, if you have got the assignment to do the statutory audit of 3 branches and tax audit of 3 branches, the 3 branch tax audit will be considered as one, even though you are issuing branch tax audit reports separately. So all taken together, it will be treated as one. However, in counting the 60 number, the part-time partners shall be excluded. That means one cannot take the advantage of admitting another chartered accountant as a part-time practice who is in full-time employment as well as in part-time practice and to have 60 audits in his name. It is not permissible. Now, the audit can be signed by anyone on behalf of the firm. That means suppose A, B, C are the 3 partners and they have not accepted any tax audits in their individual names, as well as there is no common partner or none of the partner A, B, C are partners in another firm, a simple partnership firm with 3 partners, then in the aggregate they can do the audit, tax audit of 180 entities or 180 assignments. Now, this 180 assignments can be signed by one partner alone. It is not necessary that each one will sign 60 tax audit reports. One partner of the firm can sign on behalf of all the partners in a partnership firm. So, it will be considered as 180 tax audits can be signed by a partner of ABC, because the total entitlement for the firm is 180 tax audits. So all the tax audits of a partnership firm can be signed by one member or one partner of the CA firm. As to the clause 7 of the guidelines deals with outstanding audit fees. All of us are aware that under clause 8 of part 1 schedule 1 to the Chartered Accountants Act, the new auditor or incoming auditor must communicate with the previous auditor. That is the requirement of the Chartered Accountants Act, and the requirements as to the outstanding fees is covered by para 7 of the Council General Guidelines 2008. If the audit fees are outstanding, that is, if they are not paid, then the incoming auditor or new auditor cannot accept the assignment. The point to be noted over here that the audit fees may be under the Companies Act or may be under any other law, that is including tax audit, including trust audit, including cooperative audit, etc. So wherever audit function is performed, and if the fees are payable, the new auditor cannot accept the audit unless the previous auditor has been fully paid off. Now, not only the audit fees, the expenses incurred in connection with audit, that means if you are done any outstation audit, and the expenses as to your lodging, boarding, stay, etc., transportation, etc., is reimbursable by the auditee, then these expenses are also to be considered as outstanding for the purpose of acceptance of audit by a new or incoming chartered accountant. So audit fees plus expenses both must be paid before in respect of the previous auditor, without which the new auditor cannot accept the assignment. Now here, the important condition for this is the provision for audit fees as well as the expenses must be accepted by the auditor as well as auditee. If there is no such provision in the accounts, then you have no right. Likewise, if there are any fees outstanding, statutory audit fees as well as the professional fees for tax representation before the income tax authorities or tribunal, and those fees if not paid, then as per this clause 7, the lien, I can use the word lien, is only in respect of audit fees. It is not in respect of other professional charges payable by the auditee to the previous auditor. So concern is only with audit fees and not any other kind of fees. Then clause 8 puts a restriction on the company audits, maximum 30 companies, including private companies as well as public companies. As all of us are aware, as per Companies Act 2013, in counting the number 30, private companies are excluded, but the institute has come out in this Council General Guidelines 2008 in paragraph 8 that the maximum number of audits that can be done by a practicing chartered accountant shall be restricted to 30 only, inclusive of private limited companies. But in counting 30 number, one-person companies, OPCs, as well as dormant companies shall be excluded. And whatever the principles or whatever the rules, restrictions we have seen in case of tax audit is equally applicable to company audit, like it is 30 number for per partner. If individually accepted any company audit, that is to be excluded. Even if a particular chartered accountant is partner in 2 or more firms, then pertaining to that partner, the number shall not exceed 30. The partner who is in part-time employment, who is in part-time practice, shall be excluded. The HO and branches shall be taken as 1. All branches to be taken as 1. That means all these restrictions what we have just seen in case of tax audit are equally applicable, or I can use the word mutatis mutandis, to the company audit also. However, as to the fees for other services, there is a provision in clause 9 or para 9 of the Council General Guidelines 2008. Now this clause 9 is applicable to statutory auditors of public sector undertakings, government companies, listed companies, and public companies having turnover more than 50 crores. That means all other companies are excluded from para 9 of these guidelines. So public companies with turnover more than 50 crores, a private company with turnover more than 50 crore is excluded from para 9. Now what are the conditions? The remuneration payable to such auditor for other assignments, for other services, shall not exceed the statutory audit fees. Now let's see with an example. Suppose A is a statutory auditor of a public sector undertaking or a government company or a public company with more than 50 crore turnover. His audit fees are say 2 lakh rupees, and he is also doing the other assignments like tax audit. He is filing the tax returns, he is representing the company before the tax authorities, and the fees for such other assignments is 2,50,000 rupees, whereas the statutory audit fees are only 2 lakh rupees. It is prohibited to accept such assignments. That means his fees for other services cannot exceed the statutory audit fees. However, I again repeat whom the clause is applicable: government company, then listed company, PSU, as well as public company with more than 50 crore turnover. Excepting these four group of companies, there is no restriction whatsoever in respect of accepting or receiving fees more than the statutory audit fees. Now, this restriction is also applicable to associate entities. That means a chartered accountant firm, say ABC, doing the audit of a listed company, and the fees are 5 lakh rupees. Now, ABC three partners have also formed another private limited company for management consultancy services, and through that management consultancy services, some assignments are accepted from that listed company of which they are the auditor. So the limit of 5 lakh for other services is equally applicable in the aggregate to the auditor firm as well as the associate of auditor firm. Now, what is an associate of auditor firm? Again given in clause 9 or para 9 of the Council General Guidelines, that common directorship or a person having substantial interest in the company, that means ABC have got substantial interest in the management consultancy limited, or relative of ABC have got substantial interest in the company which has got the assignment for other services. So this is how the restrictions have been put on the professionals in accepting or receiving assignments in excess of statutory audit fees. Now, this concludes the lecture. If you like it, please forward it to fellow professionals, because many questions I have answered on this particular clause about the fees, how much one can accept, and how many audits a person can perform. Thank you very much. In most probably 1 or 2 lectures, we will conclude the General Council Guidelines 2008. Thank you very much.